Hi, morning to all of you. Now, today I'm going to discuss new topic, which is a very burning issue right now, present scenario. We are listening about the melting or retreating of glacier, and the major cause behind it is the global warming and the climate change. So, recently, why we are talking about these issues, the retreat or the melting of the glaciers, because recently what we observe that one of the hue and cry created because of the melting of the glaciers of Venezuela. The Venezuela lost its last glacier. So why the glaciers are melting with the fast rate? It's a natural phenomenon. As you know that the glaciers feed the rivers. The glaciers are source of the moraines and tills, and that deposits the people since long practicing agriculture in the moranic and the tills deposits. So these are the glacier are the resources also for the mankind since long. And the formation of the glacier and the melting of a glacier is a natural phenomenon. But why it is in news? Because the rate of the melting of the glacier is increasing with very fast rate. Now today I'm going to discuss here what are the major causes of the melting or the retreat of the glacier and where this melting takes place, whether across the globe or in a particular region of the world, how these glaciers forms. I will also discuss briefly because in a separate lecture in the glacial landform I had discussed in detail about the formation of the different landforms by the glaciers. Okay, and the utility and significance of that landforms I had discussed separately. Today, my focus is on the formation of the glaciers, the causes of retreat in the present scenario. So here, why I have taken this topic, because recently we had heard the news that Venezuela lost its last glacier. So now the climatologists and environmentalists are quite worried by this phenomena of the melting of the glaciers. Now here, I would like to discuss first of all what are glaciers and where these glaciers are located across the globe, how it forms. So let's understand over the globe, when you look at over this entire globe, the region of this globe, only 10% of the area of this globe is covered with the glaciers. Here we find in the region of Arctic and Antarctic. And in the Arctic belt, when you look at, the major ice sheets were present in the Greenland. When you look at the type of glaciers, the glacier can be divided into two major types. One are the alpine glaciers and other are the ice sheets. Basically, these are the two major category of the glaciers we find all across the globe. Alpine glaciers located across the mountains, while the ice sheets are spreading all across the lowland areas close to the polar areas. Say for example, as I have given the example of the Arctic belt, for example, Greenland, basically the ice sheets are present, and the Antarctic. So the 10% of the world's land mass is currently occupied by the glaciers. And out of this 10%, when you look at the majority of glacier, almost 90% of the glaciers are located at the two places all across the world. One is the region of Antarctica, another is the Greenland. So 90% of the world glacier is located at these two places. Here the huge thick ice sheets are present. Okay. Now apart from that, as I have said, One type of glacier is the alpine glacier, which is located along the mountains, the loftiest mountains, say for example the Rockies in the North America, the Andes in the South America, the Alps in Europe, the Atlas as well as Himalayas. So the alpine glacier, except when you look at the except Australia, it present all across the continent. Okay, in all the continent the alpine glacier present except Australia. So now when you look at the glacier are important features, because as I have said, the glaciers are very important sources. It feed the rivers, okay, and it affects the water cycle. The water cycle, the hydrological cycle affected by the glaciers, because these glaciers are the sources of the rivers. They feed the rivers, okay, and the rivers originated, there are lots of mighty rivers originated from the glaciers. The glaciers are source, for example the Indus, the Jhelum, Nab, the Brahmaputras, the Ganga, okay, here in India are originated. So the hundreds and thousands of rivers are originated from these glaciers, and due to the heating the transpiration takes place, and when the transpiration or as well as the evaporation takes place, so because of evapotranspiration, what happened, the water changes its phase, converted into the water vapor. We find the phase change because of the change in the temperature. So the water, as you know, is found over the land in different states. The water is present in the form of solid. The ice is a solid form of the water, as well as the liquid, water itself, and the gases. And the phase change takes place because of change in the temperature and pressure. So when we talk about the water cycle, so how the water cycle begins? Okay, when the sunlight reaches to the earth's surface, because of heating of the water bodies as well as the lands, here the vegetations are there. So from here the water changes its phase, the liquids converted into the gases, and evaporation, the process is called evaporation. Evaporation takes place and the steam is okay into the atmosphere, and from here the leaves of the trees, the process of transpiration takes place. So this evapotranspiration led to the formation of the steam, and the steams when condensed form the clouds, and the clouds again the various form of precipitation. Here the water again reaches to the earth's surface, and this is the hydrological cycle. In general, I had discussed in detail this in a separate climatology lecture. The hydrological cycle, what are the factors which lead to phase change. Okay, so now I will give you a separate link for that. So now when you look at, so here what I have said, that glaciers are important feature in the Earth's hydrological cycle. So if the glacier started retreating, this water cycle disturbed, because this hydrological cycle, and once the hydrological cycle disturbed, the volume of the water in the different rivers also started affecting, and it led to variability of, and the water quality also started affecting. Okay, so now because of this glaciers, which is a very important source of the water after the melting, which is a natural phenomena, okay, the mighty rivers continuously flow over the earth's surface. But why there is a problem? Why there is a problem? Because of the melting. The question is, okay, this natural phenomena which took place, now the rate of this retreat has been increased. These are the places where the world's glaciers are located. Here, this is the Arctic region, this is the Antarctic, this is the Rockies, this is the Andes, and here the Alps. Okay, now when you look at the Greenland, the Dolane Mountains and the Himalayas. Okay, so of this region, now here when you look at the majority of ice sheets are located in this region, while the alpine glaciers are present along this, okay, except this Australia where the alpine glaciers are missing. Now when you look at what are the glacier and how it forms, the glacier are the thick masses of the ice, how these masses of the ice accumulate and forms, and why these masses of ice started flowing. Because what is the glacier? Glacier is the moving ice. Why the ice started moving? Okay, so when you look at these thick masses of the ice, what we called the glacier, once you look at, okay, once you look at due to the accumulation of snow over the centuries. So this huge ice sheets of the Antarctica and the Greenland and these alpine glaciers of the Andes, Rockies, it's not created in a single day. It's formed in centuries. This alpine mountains forms during the tertiary period and the earth passes through the phase of glaciation. Okay, now this is the phase of interglaciation where the temperature of the earth is increasing and the glacier started melting. So further I will explain through the flow chart how it forms. According to the United States Geological Survey, USGS, what the temperature which required for the formation of the glacier, they usually exist, this glacier usually exists and form where the mean annual temperature reaches near the freezing point. And the winter precipitation largely in the form of the ice or the snow. So winter precipitation in the form of snow, the Earth's surface temperature, the atmosphere which is close to the Earth's surface reaching towards the freezing point, the precipitation is in the form of snow. Snow started accumulating over the Earth's surface and the layer of the ice forms. Gradually because of compression, gradually because of their overload, okay, there was no external factor for the melting of the ice. Because of its load, which is called compression load, okay, what happened? This ice started melting. The glacier are the flowing ice. So when you look at here, what I would like to state it that due to their sheer mass and gravity, when you look at, because of their sheer mass and gravity, as I have said, glacier tend to flow like a very slow river. So what are the glacier? Glacier are the moving ice. And why this ice is started melting? Because of their shear pressure, because of compression. Okay, because when the thick mass, when over the Earth's surface, what we observe over this Earth's surface, okay, ice started accumulating and the layers of ice forms. These layers are called firn. Because of this shear forces or compression forces, because of this load, the underlying layers started melting. And flowing. So these underlying layers started melting because of overlying thick masses of ice, and the movement of the ice begins with the rate of the movement is very slow. We called it glacier. So glaciers are the moving ice forms because of accumulation of snow over the earth's surface, whether it is the mountains we called alpine glacier, or over the surfaces at the all along the grounds. Okay, the lowland area also close to the polar areas, the ice sheets forms. So here I have mentioned, and although there is no universal consensus on how large masses of ice has to be qualify as a glacier, the USGS says commonly accepted guidelines is around 10 hectare. If the snow accumulated in the 10-hectare areas according to USGS accepted norm, it is, we called it the glacier. Now when you look at, try to understand through these flow charts how it forms. So here I had mentioned that when the Earth's temperature reached a freezing point now, and the winter rainfall is in the form of snow, so all glacier derived from this. The precipitation in the form of a snow when takes place, the snow started accumulating, and this first fall, and it has density of almost 0.1. So density of the snow is around 0.1 gram per centimeter cube, and because this snow start accumulating, and because of accumulation and settling of the snow, the compaction takes place, and gradually this is snow now, because of compaction, converted into the new or fern with the larger density of 0.0, 0.6, 0.6. This is the density. So the density of the fern, as I have discussed earlier, so over the surface, as I have said, when the snow started accumulating one above the others, where the thick layers of the snow started accumulating, okay, the overlying layers put pressure over the underlying layers, and the compaction begins, and because of the compaction, this snow accumulate and compact and form the neve and fern. So it is called the neve or fern, and the density increases because of compaction. Further, what I have discussed further transform into the polycrystalline ice. Now because of intense compaction, it converted into polycrystalline ice at a density of 0.9. So further this fern converted, take a specific crystalline structure, the molecules are started compacting, okay, and forms the crystalline structure. Now the density of this polycrystalline structure of the ice has increased and reaches 0.9. So gradually, once you look at, because of compaction, the density has started increasing, and because of this, what happened? Why this accumulation of this, and this forms the thick ice sheets, or over the top of the mountains, the alpine glaciers. Now, as I have said, because of the shear pressures, or because of the compression forces, this underlying ice started melting, and they started flowing very slowly. This moving ice is called glacier. So this flow, through this flow chart, you can understand the stages of the formation of the glaciers. So through these stages, the glaciers forms. Okay. Now let's understand. So when you look at This is the zone of accumulation. Here you can understand through these images that because of the low temperature of the atmosphere, when the precipitation took place, the precipitation is in the form of snow. There are various form of precipitation: snow, sleet, hails. Okay, all these are the rain, drizzle, all these are the form of precipitation. So when the earth's atmospheric temperature reaches the freezing point, the snowfall takes place, snow started accumulating. So this is the zone of accumulation. This is the zone of accumulation. Now the thick layers of ice started, okay, forming here. Now the flow trajectory you can find out. This is the trajectory of flow. This is the line of equilibrium, and below this equilibrium lines, when you look at, this is the summer fern line, because from, if you move forward, this is the zone of ablation when the melting takes place. Okay, and because of the meltings of the ice, now when you look at, the huge icebergs forms and the ice are melting water. So this is the zone of ablation, and above it the glacier are intact. Now here the crevasses are formed below these lines, and this is the zone of ablation with the melting. And why the melting takes place? This is the summer fur line. I had discussed in detail when I was discussing the glaciated landforms about this. Okay, so because of the ablation, now this is the zone of ablation. Now the ablation takes place, melting starts. Okay, and because of the meltings, what happened here, when you look at, this is the terminus or the toe of the glacier. So glaciers, when this is an example of the alpine glaciers, which is moves downward, okay, from the mountains. And this alpine glaciers also forms the trough or the valley, and largely the valley shape is U-shaped. So they create a trough, a U-shaped valleys. And because of the shear pressure, and sometimes because of the increasing temperature, the ablation and the melting takes place. And because of the meltings, the ice converted into the water, and the huge ice sheets are also formed. Okay, now what is the basic issue? Why we are discussing this topic? Because as I have said that recently we have heard the news about what? About the melting of the glaciers in Venezuela, and Venezuela lost its last glacier. But this is not only the case with the Venezuela. All across the world, when you are looking at the Norways, this Finland, Sweden, in entire Arctic region, in the Greenland, in Canada, in the Arctic belts, in the Rockies, Andes, where the Venezuela lies, okay, in Himalayas, Hindu Kush, okay, all what we are in Antarctica, we are continuously listening the news of the increasing rate of the melting of the glacier. Yes, of course, Venezuela is in news. That's why I had covered this. Okay, but another in the another belt of the Earth also, whether it is the alpine glacier or the ice sheets, okay, they are continuously in news because the rate of ablation, the rate of melting is very high today. So what is the reason? So Venezuela, for instance, has likely become the first country in the modern history to lose all its glaciers. Okay, and what was the name of this glacier? The scientific reclassified the Humboldt Glacier of the Venezuela last remaining is we lost. So Venezuela create a history. Okay, that history is not for the good causes. So it okay. So it's create the history. Why? Because they lose the Indian glaciers. The name of that glacier was Humboldt, last remaining glacier. Okay. Now, Venezuela was home to the 6 glaciers earlier, located about 5,000 meters above the sea level in the Andes Mountains. This is a South American countries through which the Indian mountains process. Earlier, they are abode of the 6 glaciers. Now they lose the last one, the Humboldt glaciers. Okay. And now, so by 2011, the 5 of them had vanished, and the scientists expected the Humboldt glacier to the last another decade. But what is the surprising element for the global scientists, and why the scientists are worried? Because this Humboldt glacier we have used last month. And that's why a surprising and a very surprising events, okay, melted with the very fast rate than expected, and shrunk to an area of less than 2 hectares, leading to its downgrade from a glacier to an ice field. This is the broken ice field. Now it is not comes under the category of the glaciers, because the glacier started ablating and the remaining fields are there, which we called as what? The ice field. This is the Humboldt glacier. So that's why we are discussing. And much like the Humboldt glaciers, other glaciers across the world are also shrinking and disappearing. Okay. And 2/3 of the projected melt out, when you look at disappearing with the fast rate, and researchers thought that 2/3 of them projected to melt out by 2100. What are the major causes? Okay. According to 2023 study, what is the major cause? The major cause is, of course, the climate. And why the climate change? This climate change is again a natural phenomenon. But why we are worried? Because the rate of the climate change is again increasing because of anthropogenic activity. Anthropogenic activity. Basically, who is the major culprit? The greenhouse gases. The man has, during this long course of the Indian civilization, has emitted the huge amount of greenhouse gases. Say, for example, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, okay, SO2, water vapor, methane. These are the greenhouse gases. These are the major culprit which lead to the greenhouse effect. They create barrier in the path of the emitting radiations from the earth, and the atmosphere, the roof of the earth get heated, and because of this the earth's temperature started rising. Surprising, this year the Delhi temperature reached 52 degrees Celsius. This increasing temperature led to the increasing frequency of the cyclones, and that also led to the forest fire, droughts, floods, retreating of glacier, rise of the sea level, okay, a scarcity of the groundwater. So this climatic phenomena, what we called it climate change, responsible for various disasters, natural havoc, threat to the civilization, threat to the mankind, threat to the various places all across the world. There are various mega cities, towns of the human habitation, and the large settlements are on the verge of extinction because of the changing sea level. Okay. So this is the major cause. So what are the cause? As I have mentioned, the global warming, the release of the greenhouse gases, okay, the methane, CO2, CO, the SO2, NO, okay, or NOx, as well as the water vapor. These are the prominent greenhouse gases. And there are various sources: the industry, the vehicular population, the pollutions, okay, the forest fire, the burning of the crops, okay, even the agriculture practices like the farming of the rice, sugar can also lead to the formation of the methane, okay, the stagnant water bodies also releases. So there are various sources of the greenhouse gases, but largely why the amount of this greenhouse gases increases? Because of anthropogenic activity. Naturally these gases are also present, but now the concentration of these gases is increasing, which led to the greenhouse effect that led to global warming, okay, because these gases trapped the radiation, the back radiation from the earth, which are largely in the form of long wave radiations. These long waves, which is the back radiations, when the earth receives the sunlight, majority of the sunlight reaches to the earth's surface hot wavelengths. But when this earth started releasing this radiation, largely these radiations are long wave radiation, which is trapped by these greenhouse gases, which led to the global warming. That effect is known as green, and because of which the temperature of the earth's surface is increasing, which melting of the glaciers. So this is the major cause, that the concentration of the greenhouse gases, the increasing concentration. So when you look at the average temperature to increase by at least 1.1 degrees Celsius since 1880s because of anthropogenic activities. And you can link to the industrial revolution. When the industrial revolutions begins, okay, right from the England, and it impacted the other part of the worlds, not only the Europes, the imperialism and the colonialism begins. They started forming the colonies, okay, to secure their resources. Industrialization processes begins, okay. Now that led to the emission of the greenhouse gases. Now as the countries started developing, for the development we need energy, and largely the countries depend on the non-renewable source of energy. They started burning the coal, the fossil fuels, the petroleums, and that led to emission. So the development was not sustainable. Now today we are talking about sustainable development. When we understand that we had damaged our climate, we had damaged the planet Earth, then we started thinking about the sustainable development, as you people know. Today, globally, we are talking about the climate change, the mitigations programs, okay. Now, so the temperature rise may seem small, but it has a devastating consequences. This mere 1.1 degrees Celsius change in temperature having devastating influences. It led to various catastrophes. As I have said, the frequency of the cyclone increases, okay. There is a recurrent flood and droughts, the forest fires, okay. The temperature is increasing, it created the scarcity of the waters. So now that led to the threat to the human civilization all across the world, and that led to also the thawing of the glaciers. Now the Indian Cordilleras, when you look at running through the parts of the Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela, where the Venezuela become the first country to lost their last glaciers, has witnessed a temperature increase as with the higher rate of 0.10 degrees Celsius in the past 7 decades. So this rise in the temperature of the Indian mountains led to the increasing rate of the melting and ablation of the glaciers, and that become the major cause for the loss of glaciers in the Venezuela region. So in the case of the Humboldt glaciers, the melting was also accelerated by El Nino. What is El Nino? El Nino refers to the abnormal warming of the surface of the Pacific, equatorial Pacific Ocean. Further in the monsoon discussion, I had discussed in detail the El Nino phenomena as well as La Nina phenomena and Indian Ocean dipole. So I have separately discussed the phenomena of El Nino, but for you people, those who are freshers, it is an abnormal warming because along the Peruvian coast, when you look at, the cold current is prevalent, Humboldt current or the Peru current. But what happened suddenly when the Pacific started warming, the temperature of the Pacific started increasing, the warm current started accumulating, the surface of the water is heated. That phenomena is called El Nino. So the Humboldt glaciers, the another reason for the melting of the Humboldt glacier is El Nino phenomenon, because of the heating. Because when you look at the ice sheets of the Greenland, the ice sheets of the Antarctica are melting because of the warm current. The warm current and the warm air also play a very significant role. The warm air which is moving over the surfaces also ablate and melt the glaciers, the ice sheets of Antarctica. But not only the warm air is responsible for the melting of the glaciers, but also the oceanic currents. Further, in oceanography, I had discussed oceanic current in details. The oceanic currents are of two types. One, the cold current, another is the warm current. Largely, the warm current are moving on the surface and the cold current are moving slightly deeper in the ocean. Okay. Basically, the cold current are moves from the polar region towards the equator, while the warm current are moving from the equator towards the pole and create a gyre, a circulations. Okay. In different oceans, the name of the ocean current are different. For that, you can look at our lecture on the ocean currents. Okay. Now, when you look at, so here what I have said, that the El Nino also become a cause for the melting of the Humboldt glaciers. Okay, it's a natural phenomenon. Now, so particularly I am talking about Humboldt glacier, I am talking about the Venezuelan glaciers. But when you are considering the melting of the Greenland, melting of the Arctic ice, melting of the ice sheets of the Antarctica, the warm air as well as the warm ocean currents are also responsible for the melting. So what I have said, that what are the factors, as I have said, not only the greenhouse gases which are responsible for the global warming are a factor for the melting of the glacier. These are the factor for the melting of the glacier, but also the phenomena like El Nino, the warming of the ocean currents are responsible for basically the melting of the Humboldt glacier of Venezuela. Humboldt glaciers of Venezuela, what we are expecting to melt further few decades later. Apart from that, the other glaciers of the world are melting because of the warm ocean currents, and this warm ocean current, the ocean current is warming with the faster rate because of the global warming and also because of the warm air which is blowing. All these are related to this global warming. Okay, because now gradually the earth temperature is started rising. Since 1818, as I have said, the earth's temperature rise almost around 1 Celsius. And according to Maximiliano Herrera, the climatologist, the Indian area of Venezuela, there have been some months with monthly anomalies of +3 to +4 degrees Celsius between 1990 and 2000. And that was exceptional. That led to the ablation. Okay. Now, when you look at this image, okay, now here you can look at the splinter of ice spill of the Perito Morena Glacier near the city of El Calafate in the Patagonian province of Santa Cruz, southern Argentina in 2000. This was photographed, okay, and this. So here you can look at. So now this rate of melting has increased because of increasing temperature of the sea as well as the earth's surface. Okay, now so what about India? According to 2023 reports, when you look at the Indian glaciers are melting with unprecedented rates, okay, across the Hindu Kush Himalayas mountain ranges, and could lose up to 80% of their volume this century if greenhouse emissions are not drastically reduced. According to this 2023 reports, if the Earth's temperature increases with the rate of 1 degree Celsius, we are going to lose almost 80 to 90% of our glaciers of Himalaya. And that is the cause of concerns for the environmentalist. This is the cause of concerns for the climatologist. Okay, because we are also losing. And as you people know that these glaciers of Hindu Kush Himalayas, the Himalayas are the source of various mighty rivers. They are cradle for the civilizations. They are boon for the mankind. If we lose these glaciers, this will create unprecedented loss. Okay. What are the impacts? As I have said, the entire water cycle will disturb if we lose our glacier. So it led to a scarcity of the fresh water. The entire water cycle will disturb the volume, the variability, the quality of the water started affecting. Okay, that led to the scarcity of the fresh water. And as you know, majority of the part, 71% part of the earth is occupied by the marine water. The ocean and sea has occupied. And over the land, only 1% part of the earth is having the fresh water. And we are on the verge of this loss of this fresh water because of the retreating glacier. You can understand the seriousness. So the first thing. Second, there are various species, those who are living in the water because of the increasing temperature or the decreasing temperature of the water. Okay, when the ice started melting, the cold water that runoff glaciers skips downstream water temperature cooler, and because of decline of the temperature, because of melting of the ice, what we are going to lose various species. We had already lost various species, those who cannot survive on this temperature. Okay, so this is crucial for many aquatic species in the region, as they need cold water temperature to survive. But according to USGS, glacier loss directly impacts such species and which an area essential part of the wave. So few species can grow in a cold water when the ice started melting. But as I have said, the temperature of the water is increasing, that led to extinction of various species. And the frequent melting of the glacier in certain region where the temperature is decreasing. There are two. Consequently, in some area globally, the water temperature is increasing. That increasing water temperature may lead to threat to the species, those who are adapted to live in the cold environment. While because of the recurrent meltings and the mixing of the cold water, there is a threat to the species like the coral species, those who can grow in the tropical sea. Okay. So there is a threat to the coral species because of the cold water. So both the things we have the threat that we are going to lose the diversity, the biodiversity, because of this changing sea level as well as the changing temperature. And gradually when we started losing this glacier because of melting, there is an immediate threat to the species, those who are survive in the cold water, because further there was no of the cold water once we lost the glacier. So immediately this cold water species, the aquatic species started, we lost this biodiversity. Okay, and survival of this entire ecosystem. Then of course it led to the rise in the sea level again, which led to threat to the various coastal areas of the world. There are so many cities of the world or the settlements having threat because of this rise of the sea level. Because of this rise of the sea level, there is a threat to the coral species, those who the coral are growing, the corals, basically the coelentrates, polypoid structure, grow on the basement on the shallow sea. If the sea level rises, they are gradually lost, extinct. So the sea level not only poses threat to the human settlement, but also poses threat for the biodiversity. Lose various species. Another, loss of the regional culture, because that led to the, there are huge amount of the people, those who are linked with this environment, their food habits, their clothes, their rituals, customs. Okay, all are linked with the nature. Now, when you look at, for example, the South American country, however, the biggest impact of losing all the glaciers will be the cultural. Louis Daniel Lamb, an ecologist, told The Guardian that glaciers were a part of a region's cultural identity and for mountaineer and activists. So, as you know, here across India, the people visited a pilgrim center, the Amarnath, okay, and the Kailash. So the people all across the world are associated, their cultural association with the environment, with the environment. Okay. So this Mansarovar Lake, say for example, if it is retreating, if we lose future, what about this voice? Okay. So it affect. Now the question is how we can stop. There was no concrete technology, there was no concrete formula till now. The only suggestions by the scientists is, first we have to reduce the concentration of the greenhouse gases, and for that the entire world community has to take seriously this issue of climate. And now today the world community is serious and working on the Paris Agreement. Okay. The UN has adopted the Sustainable Development Goal. So they had taken the measures, and all across the world, the country, okay, even at individual levels, trying hard to cope up with these issues. But again, this issue is very alarming. But apart from that, the scientists are talking about some of the technology measures to immediately curb this issue. One of the scientists, one of the glaciologists, Moore, has suggesting about the formation of construction of a curtain. For example, here I had mentioned that apart from promoting the use of renewable and green sources of energy at a global level, we have to promote it so we can reduce the greenhouse gases. Scientists also propose the solution is the construction of 100-kilometer long curtain that would be moved to the bed of the Amundsen Sea in the Antarctica. Okay, and it would rise to about 200 meters from the ocean floor. So what the scientists suggesting to stop the melting, formation of a curtain on the bed of the sea Amundsen in Antarctica. As you know, the Antarctica, where more than 80 stations of the different countries are there. The scientists are living there for the research purposes. That was a huge thick of ice, and now according to the recent study, what we find, the break in the ice sheets in Antarctica, and the scientists are worried. Okay. Now, so what the scientists suggested, a technologies of formation of 200-meter high curtains on the seabed, which would partially restrict the inflow of relatively warm water. When what the scientist has suggested, the formation of the curtain on the surface like that. So from here, the warm water is not reaching here, and it stops the melting of this ice. So this is the glacier fronts, and this is the ice bed, and this is the curtain. Okay, the seabed anchored curtains, which stops the warm water which is flowing towards Antarctica, and that led to the what this reduction of the melting of the ice sheets. This was a suggestion, but it's what not easy to build such a curtain, such a huge curtain. Why? Because scientists even thinking about what kind of material they will use. The research is still going on, and it's a long drawn programs of the scientist. And who is the pioneer of this thought? The pioneer of this thought, this was proposed by the John Moore of the Lapland University, who is working with the scientist at the University of Cambridge and other center in the US, and would stretch along the seabed opposite the Quartz and the Pine Iceland glacier, and these act as plugs that prevent the giant ice sheets behind them from sliding into the ocean. So this was suggestions, but as I have said, they set to begin the research to pinpoint the best material for their construction. So it's a challenging project. First, they had to develop such a material through which helps to form this curtain and the wall on the seabed to restrict the warm water. One suggestions by the scientist, one idea is how they form the curtain by using the air. They are suggesting that they create the air barriers, a pipe with the holes drilled along it, and would be laid down along the seabed, and the air when pumped through it, it swell the curtain air bubbles that would rise from it might then be able to hold back the ingress of the warm sea water. So this is one suggestion. Still, it will take time. Apart from this curtain, other measures taken by the scientists in the region of Arctic, the research is going on. The scientists are using the brine water, the salty water, for the accumulation of snow. Because of a spray over the ice of the brine water, the accumulation of this forms the superficial layer over the ice, and that layer started what, accumulating the snow. So the melting of the ice reduced because of this brine water. So one measures taken by the scientists today is the spread of the brine water. In the Norway, some voluntary organizations also using what, they started painting the rocks of the mountains through the white color, so it acted like a reflector, it reflected the light, okay, and reduced the temperature. So there are various measures in the recent past taken by the scientists, okay, to reduce the temperature of the Earth's surface, to stop the melting of the ice. But the ultimate solution is that we have to reduce the greenhouse gases to save these glaciers, which are basically very, very essential for survival of this mankind and for the survival of the millions and millions of species over the earth. So this is the discussion you have to keep in mind, and I think it may be a probable question for this year, and it may be asked in the paper 1 of GS as well as the paper 3 of GS as well as the geography of. Okay, so take care, have a nice time.